Welcome everybody tonight to our City Walk program. A special thanks to Ann Whitehouse for bringing Charles McKinney to us and the topic of City Walk Birmingham to find out what's going on underneath the bridges and viaducts of Birmingham. Charles McKinney is a distinguished architect, and he and Kathy Sloss Jones, were on a panel that gave guidance to the panel that I'm going to let Charles describe this better, but they had a lot to do with the formulation of this city walks. And so without further ado, let me let Charles take over. And Ann is recording, right?
Yes, she is.
We'll have you hold your questions, please, until Charles gives you the opportunity to speak up.
We are so, I'm so appreciative of this opportunity. You know, it just makes you get your crap together. It makes you say, what is it I'm thinking about right now? And I have not been in Birmingham for some months, but I have to say that I have some opinions about the new park that's being constructed underneath the elevated highway. And I am also most appreciative of being amongst this group. I believe that just because of the period that you all went through together, that you have knowledge that anyone else would not have. And that I think by the virtue of the fact that you've remained engaged with one another and with your city, I think that you probably have influence and you have leadership skills. And it's always good when you get to speak to a group like this. I have found that in life that I have to talk to people who have more direct experiences than my own. And that if you rely on what you know from the past or what you just simply perceive from the future, you're gonna, from the present, you're likely just to miss opportunities for the future. And that my secret sauce is you just listen to people who know stuff. And it's like a big game of concentration. You just try to keep track of who's passionate about what, so that when you have the opportunity to make change happen, you can put like-minded, passionate people together. And I gather that you already have, you know, many, many shared passions. And I feel so lucky to be part of this. And you made me actually take stock of what I think is important to talk about tonight, because there's this park underneath the highway, but it is more than that. And I'm going to try to put it in context so that it can become part of your conversation with others. Now, let me see if I can remember how. Oh, you have to. So someone has to enable screen sharing. So that might be Judy. Can you enable my screen sharing?
You should have it now, Charles.
Okay, let's see what I have. Okay, I have it. Now let's see if we can just simply find what it is I'm supposed to share. There we go. And I just love this slide. You're not going to be able to see your faces. So you're going to, if you go to sleep, I will never be able to know, but I'll imagine you smiling in contentment. Kathy brought me and a group of people together to take a look at the way this project is developing. And I just wanted to help you understand a little bit about what I think about parks, first of all, which is, you know, Central Park. This is Central Park. Central Park was built on a swamp.
Ann, have you got it?
Excuse me, Charles, we're not seeing your slides.
We're not seeing anything, Charles, nothing. Huh?
Let's see what we can do here. Let's try again.
It said that it's disabled, so you need to enable it.
We've already practiced this,
Here we
Ann.
go.
Okay.
How about this one? You see my screen now?
Yes, we see the whole screen, but we're not
You
seeing
see
the
whole
slides.
screen. Okay, so here we go. We'll get those up. Looking better?
Getting close.
All right. How
Excellent.
about
We
that?
see it now. Thank you.
Do you see your faces over here? Or okay, there we go. So it's Central Park. This is an aerial view of Central Park, and when it was conceived by Frederick Law Olmsted, the designer, this was a swamp. And people said, "Why do you want to build a park there? No one is living there." And this has become the identity of New York City. And it is often cited as the reason that the property values are around it. Now, I'll tell you about me. I started in New York City in 1981, and I had one of my most formative experiences when I worked on a master plan for Riverside Park. And that was that I was working on a master plan. I ran that corner and I saw a sign in the park that was labeled flowers. They're putting in a garden. And I thought, well, this is not in my master plan. And then I started meeting them and I said, well, a flower garden here is a beautiful thing. And I decided that I would support them. And so it was not my idea, but there were people who were passionate about it. And they built this garden, and this garden became so beautiful that it was a neighborhood attraction, and it even made it into this You've Got Mail movie. And that I realized again and again that it doesn't have to be my idea. I just have to recognize good ideas and help to make them happen. And then I also, in my responsibility as a planner for the Parks Department, I just began to realize just how much walking was important and how our parks make it easy for people to walk to the places that they want to get to. They don't have to drive, and how it changes everything. And that when they're after school sports, what a difference it makes for the children, and that there are things for them to do after school, and that there are other associations for them to make, and that these things are lifelong associations and skills of cooperation and resiliency and enjoyment and friend making. And so I think that it's very applicable when we think about the space in the Civic Center that's now going to be covered, and I'll in the future say sheltered by this highway, because I want us to think about how we think about it. But it's so important to have a place where people can mix socially with people they don't know. And then the other example, I think, which is worthy of us to think about, is that when you make a park, and it's a good one, you increase the confidence of the people around it. And this new City Walk will make a real difference. It will make residential and workspaces in its proximity more desirable, just like the High Line. This High Line was a place that people simply wanted to tear down. But it was citizens, just people who said, no, it will have value. And they just made the point that it is more valuable as a park space than it will be if you tear it down and build just more buildings. So a nonprofit, the Design Trust for Public Space, who my wife ran, did a feasibility study. And indeed, it was such a good investment. You can see the High Line in the foreground here. That's the High Line. It's built on this elevated trestle, and it runs through this previously industrial neighborhood. Well, it generated such enthusiasm that they started building buildings all around it, and they attracted $9 billion worth of new construction. Other cities are doing similar things. Toronto, this is just amazing. This is a real life picture of an elevated highway with activities underneath it.
Oh, I'll be darned.
So you start thinking to yourself, well, how do we stop thinking of it as a highway that has residual space underneath it to something that's purpose built for activities underneath it at the same time. And that is what distinguishes Birmingham. So I want us to start thinking about not just we're going to get a new park underneath the highway. We need to think about what does this mean for Birmingham? This is a nice, I love Google Maps. But you can get a photograph of anywhere and they're quite high resolution, but you recognize your civic center, BJCC, hotels, and then the restaurant, new restaurant row and the highway. And you see these parking garages, but you also see the Museum of Art and then the auditorium and then the art school. Also, I think there's a sheriff over here. But everybody put their backs to this highway. Everybody, this is where the parking lots go. This is where the service entrances are. This is back, parking lot, side, back, blank wall. What if we started thinking of this area here as the place that brings all of these places together? How could that be? And I like to look at comparables. This one's Rome. This is one of my favorite, the Piazza Navona. This is a rotunda. This, you see how all of these buildings open up onto this shared space. They have all sorts of institutions, but when you're here to go to the church or to do business, this is this vestibule that you share. And that the thing is that then there are activities that occur inside of here. This is the way we can think of this City Walk as the vestibule, as the foyer, as the common living room. It's not, should not, I think, be thought of as simply a place to put activities. It needs to be thought of as a civic scale, as a place that is important to the civic identity of Birmingham. One reason why that is so important is you have these really big institutions that have gestures on the front, like the Civic Center, but no one uses them because no one comes from this direction. What if this side was thought of as an important place? This is the art school, and they're parking at all blank walls. This needs to be the thing that we focus on, and that is what the designers have done. So here you have a picture of the highway structure in construction and the back of the auditorium and the art museum. And you begin to think, oh, well, maybe this could be seen as a pavilion rather than a highway. It gets hot in Birmingham. It rains in the afternoon. This is an amenity. And so as an effort to think about this topic, we're not drawing the elevated structure, but we're drawing now the space underneath it. And we're showing not only the buildings, but also the connections. And I'm going to point out some things that I think yet need to be done. So this is now being designed as a activity-filled covered area, which is quite an amenity. I've been in Birmingham when it's hot. And I know if I want to walk, to eat, and I'm walking from the arena, that I'm grateful to have the shade. And so this area is shady. It's not sunny like we think of parks, but it is a definite amenity, and it's been designed to be quiet underneath. So there are some next steps, and that's what I want to convey tonight. The next steps are just to think about the way these corridors go across and how they connect the neighborhoods. One of the ladies who came to one of my workshops said, why are you spending money here when we don't have sidewalks to walk there? And I thought, your the mayor wants to do something in every neighborhood. So let's get the mayor to build sidewalks that connect all of the neighborhoods together and certainly connect to this area. And I've also thought about Lynn Park. Lynn Park is a beautiful park, but there's no food there. There's no amenities. In fact, there's no food in the whole neighborhood. And where do jurors eat? I really don't know. But if we were to think about Birmingham as a city that's going to attract people to this urban area, we need to think about, not only what activities occur here, but the activities in Lynn Park. And I think also that we're going to come back to this, but the 22nd Street and 23rd Street all would benefit by more commercial activity along their route. And so our team that Kathy made possible started making a list of all the what ifs. What if there was, an expanded front door for the art school and those kids felt more ownership of that portion of the park? What if the Civil Rights Legacy Trail had more celebration along its route, especially where it crosses here? And what if, I mentioned the arena. The arena has big stairs, which are almost like the Spanish Steps. They're not as pretty as the Spanish Steps, but they're broad. And what if activities were programmed for that area? So when we think about programming, we don't want to think just about the programming of the area underneath the shelter. We need to think about all the perimeter areas that connect to it. And so as I understand it, Thad, who runs the convention center, will have responsibility for running the activities and operations of this whole City Walk zone. I think that's good. But let's see what else. The museum. So that art walk, we're going to come back to this, but I think the art walk can be improved too. That goes underneath that and through this zone. And I mentioned the neighborhood streets, and we'll move on now to the next slide, which is, Amrush Park in New York City next to Lincoln Center is not that big. It would fit in one bay of this elevated highway. And I believe that that's a plus, and that there really needs to be a defined city scale performance area incorporated. Right now, I think there is a performance area, but it's much too small. It's too much of the scale of a community college. And then the other thing that I will just point out is that this example from another city shows above, it shows, what it's like to walk. You remember what it was like to walk underneath your prior elevated highway, and it was just a no man's land. And what if you build shops and food, right next to the sidewalk, just like the rest of the city, so that when you walk through here, you're feeling like there's commercial activities that are desirable to you. And that once you're in here, you forget where you are. You don't think about, oh, I'm underneath the highway. There's simply just part of the warp and weft of the city. Do you feel the difference?
Mhm.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And it's, we don't have to invent these things. It's already being done. So here we are. So you made me go back to the City Walk. I just don't know. I think these lights are impressive. I think the idea of lighting that whole elevated structure is just brilliant. And that it's, I think because people hated the highway so much, the Department of Transportation had to do a good job. They had to do better than just an elevated highway. And that's to your credit. And I have participated as part of the Biedermann redevelopment ventures. We were brought to Birmingham by DOT to actually look at the activities that are to be included underneath the elevated highway. And we did some workshops, and we had quite a list of things, and I have made their best efforts to include them, but we had no influence over their design. And I just have to say, I've been underneath elevated structures, and this is the first time, except in Japan, where the structure was designed to be desirable underneath. And there's no, leaking. There's no places for pigeons to roost. There's no lead paint. There's no dripping. It's lit, and it's designed for the bottom to be attractive. And that, God knows I would never have expected an agency to go for a highway that can change colors. And I'm going to, when we have a little time at the end of this presentation, I'm going to want to talk about how that's been perceived in your community. But it's really significant.
Wow.
Here's an early rendering.
Oh, wow.
Isn't it neat how they make all those people and all of that? It looks almost real.
Yeah.
White. There's Ann Whitehouse. Where is she? You can actually put people's faces on these. And
Where's they?
that is not real grass, by the way. And this is the main pathway that snakes its way all the way through. And I don't really know what that's made of. It's orange here. It's orange in the renderings. And of course, this is green. That might be artificial turf, but I will assure you that nothing will grow here. Nothing. It's not enough sun. There's not enough water. And basically, you're going to have to wash it because I've done parks underneath elevated highways, and people do appreciate the shade and the freedom but you have to wash them. It's a different kind of place. It's like a room, not a park. Here's the overall plan, which is from the website. And here's the Coliseum, and over here is the art school, right here. And that there's a skate park. They really did make an attempt to there's a dog park, there's basketball courts, there are, things that look good in plan. I have my doubts about what this actual walkway is going to be like to walk on. And it's still going to be a novelty, but I have wanted to say that I think that there are a couple things that are lacking. And so if I were to make the most use of my time with you, I want to show you what I think those things are, the what's next. So here's a little blow up here's the area of the Coliseum and the Convention Center, and there's their big plaza in front. I really think that we need one place in this park that's big enough for a civic scale gathering, or even a gospel tent, or a gospel celebration, a large scale gathering. These bays are quite large. This is bigger than a basketball court. I would say this could, if the space were big enough, it could be used for ending a walk. It could be for a concert, for thousands of people. And that I'm going to use my influence. And if anyone has any particular pull, I think that this is something that we should focus on, is that there needs to be the plan currently lacks a civic scale gathering place that could be programmed. And that is actually one of its highest values, is that if you were to have a gospel, you don't have to rent a tent. You'd always have shelter, and that would save you lots of money, and I think would add to the life of the space. The other thing I mentioned is the art walk between the art museum and auditorium, the zone connections to Lynn Park. I think now that this is no longer blight, could actually benefit. And then the other general thing is, wouldn't it be nice if there were more good restaurants to eat around Lynn Park, or good food from vendors in Lynn Park? I love the idea of individual congregations being able to have events under shelter with adjacent amenities. And it does seem to me that, because, I mean, I have parachuted in, I'm making suppositions, but it seems to me that this would be a great venue for, and sought after venue for, culture that's not actually the product of the operator, that this is culture that's the product of the city and its institutions, and that people should have as much pride in having an event here as they might having an event in Central Park or any other high profile gathering. And I don't know, Kathy may know more about this than I do, but this little structure here at the end of the City Walk next to the art museum was, I believe, made to block the view and the sound of that highway originally. And since that is no longer present, and since the highway is a desirable looking structure, I think that this barrier could go away, and that we should see this whole walkway from Lynn all the way to the convention center steps and plaza as a continuous pedestrian promenade, and that we don't need these sorts of buffers any longer. That's just how urban designers think. I just think that we always have an obligation to think at the next higher level of scale and the next higher level of aspirations. And that the other thing that we need to do is we need to activate the new park with civic events. And this is exists the new structure, but we need to turn this to this. And we can do that, you know, with community engagement. And so that is really the end of my talk. And I'm hoping to leave time for community discussion and the aspirations of others. So if you don't mind, I'm going to stop screen sharing so I can see your faces. Oh, and we're going to be shy. Who would like to ask a question? Ham, how about you?
Me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So how is this, who is developing these spaces? What is the process? Where is the process right now? I mean, either you or Kathy could tell us about that. I'm just curious, is this a public-private venture, or how's it happen?
This is all public funds. It's highway funds. It's a requirement of the Alabama Department of Transportation to develop the space underneath, and that they have hired a landscape architecture firm, Barge, that is quite competent. And they have given them the charge to meet the needs of the adjacent community. And that park will be ready in next year, 2022. And that operations agreement, there's negotiations now between the convention center and Alabama DOT for the convention center to operate it. You know, DOT is not a park operator, and they need someone with local. And so I'm not sure what sort of board that they will put together, but it is important that it become broader than just the convention center.
Mhm.
Hey, Charles, do you
I'm Melvin.
anticipate having any problems with noise from the highway?
Well, has anybody been under it? Because I need a local opinion. I have a theoretical opinion, which is all the main sources of noise on most elevated structures are not present here. Normally, when you have a steel structure, you have an expansion joint at every bay, which is about every 100 feet. And that's the ka-thunk, 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 ka-thunk. And that also, this is made of concrete, so it's denser than the steel. So it is not going to rattle. The other thing is that the bay structure, they're about 300 feet apart. So there's further spaces between joints. And the texturing of the highway is such that it runs longitudinally with the highway as opposed to horizontally. So your tread noise is less. I mean, everything I could think of that would make a difference, I thought they had done. Now, I believe that it's going to be, I think if you're going to have a musical performance here, you'll still need amplification. But I do believe that you'll be able to sit on a park bench and have a comfortable conversation without being annoyed by it.
Okay.
Also, I'm pretty confident that they've done their best to prevent noise being transmitted to the adjacent uses because they have those concrete parapet walls. Noise is line of sight. And maybe if there's no, I assume traffic flow is going to be better and that the malfunction junction is not going to cause backups in the same way that it used to. And that causes frustration and honking and stopping and going. So, I mean, everything I could think of theoretically that would make a difference, I believe, had been incorporated.
For parks that are constructed like this, do they have problems with the air pollution? Like just sitting under there, or does it rise? How does it work?
Well, air pollution, cars are cleaner, but if they are moving, that is better. But if they are stopped, that is a problem.
Yeah.
Because that means acceleration. And as you know, when you accelerate, then that means you have burnt fuel you have not burned exiting your tailpipe. So the flow is the main benefit. We don't use leaded gas anymore. That used to be, a primary source of contamination. So because the cars are cleaner and the diesel is cleaner, but it's strictly a matter of the flow and the cleaner fuel burning.
Yeah, the electric cars will help as they come on.
Oh, I see. Oh, so I'm going to call, it was Anne has her hand. She's
Yeah, I
the
was
most
wondering-
vigorous hand.
Well, I was wondering, you were telling me when I first had the idea of you speaking here, you were telling me about the public participation process that you participated in when you went to Birmingham with Kathy. And I was wondering if you could just tell everybody a little bit about that and how it connects to the Civil Rights District, which is our mission here with kids in Birmingham. I'd be interested to hear about your experience with that.
So there's two questions, right? What was the public participation process on this project? And what was the second question?
Well, with the whole connection with the Civil Rights Corridor and how, those kind of themes will be incorporated.
So I love to do public participation because I genuinely want to know what you know. I try to harvest wisdom. And so when we did when I was with the Birmingham department, with the Alabama Department of Transportation, brought Biederman Redevelopment Ventures to Birmingham. We did workshops and I said, let's have maps that people can mark on. Because I want to know what you know that's specific to each location, and I don't want you to filter. I want to know what your aspirations are. So we always wrote on maps, and then I collect all that information off of those maps. I collect those names. I do a little matrix so we know who has the most interest in a particular use. And I think that those have been brought forward nicely into the current plan. The problem with that sort of questioning is that people only ask for what they know. And so nobody's asking for something big. And that's kind of my job. I have to see, I have to sort, I have to tickle and just understand what people's aspirations are, because sometimes they are so big that people are afraid, to mention them or to bring them up, because they're afraid that they won't be able to sustain the argument. But the Civil Rights District is not in our territory, but I have to say that, that is a product of people working together to raise awareness and to bring resources to bear. And those sorts of things are much more resilient, I think, than government-run things. So, but that we exist, together. And so in this instance, I think that we can do more with the corridor as it passes through the under the elevated structure.
Charles,
Yeah.
can I
Okay.
add one to Ann's thing? Because I thought that was really one of the important things that came out of our conversation, was the connection to the Civil Rights District and to the history of the city. Because if you think about, we had Stuart Oates was there from Oak Hill Cemetery as one of the participants. We were working with the museum and the city, and this was a much smaller sort of a relook at the public process. But the civil rights, Fred Shuttlesworth Drive goes right in front of Oak Hill, goes right under School of Fine Arts. Arthur Shores Park is there. Sorry guys, I'm surrounded by grandbabies and dogs, so it's a little hectic around here. But that connection and the trail, Renee's Tim Pertan's Civil Rights Trail, the marching trail, is also along that. So we really looked at that corridor as a major and important connecting corridor sort of through this, but how the messages of that history, again, of Oak Hill, which really encompasses, Fred Shuttlesworth is buried there. There's a lot of history of just the city from the beginning in the cemetery. So it was interesting to have Stuart's perspective on how this park could connect to and interact with the cemetery. Interesting, because he's thinking of it like a Mount Auburn cemetery and it's more from a historic interpretation. So that was cool. And then the connection straight back to the Civil Rights District, to the church and the institute, is really important.
And Kathy, I believe you probably were involved in the setting of the historical marker at Sloss Furnace. That was part of the Jefferson County Memorial Project. Will there be something similar to acknowledge, excuse me, several of us have been reading about the highways now, and specifically why they were put in Birmingham as they were, in order to dismantle Black communities and in order to separate Black and white communities. Is there going to be a public posting or an acknowledgement of that history? It seems like such an important opportunity for reconciliation, if that could be part of it.
That's a great idea, Ann. I think just the sky is the limit on how we interpret and use this space. It really is. It's really compelling. And Charles called me, and because I just didn't want that highway to be built. I thought it should have been torn down. I was like fighting it with everything I had. And Charles called and said, well, they're going to do it, but they're going to really work to make it interesting and how it can connect things. So I came away from this because of the work Charles did and the barge folks, feeling like we have something kind of extraordinary as an opportunity for connectivity. It was that the highway was always a divider. And if we really think of it as a connector, that becomes really compelling exercise. So yes, I think that's a great idea. I think that's important. And I think we all just got to it's a blank canvas for all of us as a community to work with TAD and the Civic Center to help build those kind of programs in that space. I'm on the board of the museum, and the museum always needs more space, and they could embrace that. School of Fine Arts clearly needs more space, so it becomes a really great area for gatherings. And so anyway, I'm excited about it. Charles convinced me that this is a good thing.
Well,
and I'm in.
So just because it has its genesis in government doesn't mean that its operation is going to remain in government. The operation is moving to the convention center. The convention center is going to need a community council. And these sorts of things need to, we're not done. This is like you built a house. Now we're going to, finish it out. And it's up to the community to establish the direction. This is your place. You need to make it what you want it to be. I think that this is a signature architecture that can help define Birmingham's future.
Well,
Now, I saw Charlotte raise a hand. Where's Charlotte? You're not on my screen. There you are.
I'm here. I didn't actually raise my hand, but I meant to.
I read your mind.
But I like it overall. It's a great idea, very exciting. But I'm thinking in terms of the everyday resident and everyday use and health maintenance and how it might be accessible to people pedestrians who want to walk early morning and evenings, and the safety as well as the access and how continuous it can be as a loop for people who might utilize it in that way.
You said loop, right?
Yes.
Loop. That's important. I don't see a loop, but I think there ought to be a loop. There might be an informal loop, but there ought to be a loop. And you ought to be able to know that when it is hot, that you can go there and you can walk in the shade and that you'll see people that, because people walk about the same time of day, and then it's different from walking on a sidewalk, I think, because you're going to be walking in a built environment designed for your amusement and the amusement of others. So there'll be all ages there. There'll be dogs, there'll be children, there'll be daycare people. And then in the evening, there'll be cocktails and dinner, or maybe on to the next activity. You'd be able to be amused. And I think it's much better than, I see a lot of people walking around tracks, and I like to walk, but I don't like to walk around tracks. I think they'll find it effective. And that I think as a topic of lack is to identify a loop for walking. We've pushed to make sure that all the bicycle routes, that need a connection in this direction get incorporated as well. I see Jackie raised her hand.
you need to unmute.
Unmute, Jackie.
Got it.
Unmute.
Got it. Charles, I am somewhat intrigued by the word loop being used, because I like to just, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
You're a little low.
Louder.
You need to raise your volume if you can, or get closer to the microphone.
I'll do both. I grew up in an area that's right under the freeway. And one of the issues that I know many in my neighborhood, or in where my grandparents lived, and I spent a lot of time, were beyond outraged, not just by being displaced, but by the very prevalent belief that Interstate 20 was not straight from Georgia through Birmingham to Tuscaloosa, but that it curved, it did a loop, it veered off from its straight route, which would have been cost efficient and efficient in so many ways, but that it looped to go through the Black community where Colin Powell's wife's father, who was the principal of the Black high school, lived. My grandparents lived. Dale Long, who's also a member of this organization. In fact, he's our communications director. And he's actually, I think, working with a project in Birmingham today, so he's not here. But his family was displaced, and it was really, the word is, and the story is that this was the area where, the prominent Black people that were doing things like senior housing facilities, and the first financial institution that made loans to Black people to be homeowners, that, the 16th Street Baptist Church leadership and several members, prominent members of that, who were involved in the Black business district and starting businesses. That's basically where they lived, and that the intent of the loop was to destroy that community, that neighborhood.
It
And
was a mean act and deliberate.
okay, so you are at least aware of that.
Well, I am, and Celestia knows it more detail than I do, but government acted that way even in New York. I mean, not to make light of it, but it was disruptive. It was devastating. It probably ruined people. And that now what,
Well,
to say it
and
was
so,
there and they ruined these people.
and
And,
so, and so
and now what?
the question what I'm listening for and hope I hear concretely at some point is that there's some, and maybe, I'm in California, I'm not in Birmingham at the moment. So I don't know that these conversations have not happened, and I'm just not aware. But I would like to know what kind of events are going, or activities, or economic development possibilities or considerations are given to you know enhance the remaining residue of those Black communities that are now on both sides of that freeway. Just, I'd like to hear something about thought and consideration given to invest.
I can only say that the activities that are present underneath the elevated highway
Raise my hand.
are activities that were desired by the community adjacent primarily. And so the activities that are in this park, let's just say we're just designing a park, that the activities are chosen to be a benefit and desirable to the adjacent communities primarily.
It is documented that the neighborhood organizations have been
Well,
participants.
I know about the invitation list, but I don't know, but I bet we could find out.
Mhm.
And that the other thing that we could do, I mean, not me, because I'm not there, but I do think that there are people who have a strong interest in the success of this park who are living in communities adjacent to it. And that with some effort, we could find out who those people were and keep them engaged. There will also be new commercial opportunities for smaller food trucks and cafe structures. But I think the Chamber of Commerce are certainly this is how I'm thinking. How do we address Jackie's concern in a real way with real people? That means people who live in Birmingham carrying this forward. And that, just what's the name of that chicken place that everybody loves? It's right there on the corner.
Chick-fil-A. Yeah.
I'm embarrassed. I can't remember, but he's been there forever. He's really near Uptown. but everybody knows where the chicken guy is in that building. He does not have any outdoor seating. So he's a local business, a Black man, has really good food, but no seating. So there, we made the point that you need to make sure that there's outdoor seating in a attractive way to serve this enterprise. Anybody who has survived this highway needs to benefit from it in its current incarnation.
So if I could just off the top of my head, say that I would appreciate knowing if the neighborhood group organizations, there are, neighborhood organizations, I belong to one of them. And, if the people who live and belong to those neighborhood groups have been invited to have direct input, and the the community churches in that area, and the largest Black high school in Birmingham still. It was when the freeway was destroyed. Parker High School, if the administration has been consulted about what might be helpful to them.
I'm sorry, I'm having such a hard time hearing. I'm trying to move all of my volumes up, and I'm trying to be attentive, but I'm just catching every other word, Jackie.
Maybe I could just drop you a note with,
Well, that would be sweet. Okay,
I'll make sure you get his contact information, Jackie.
And then I'll be
Jackie?
sure to do my very best for you.
Jackie, I think the point you're making is so critically important to the story of what the history, to me, it's like, how do we embrace and communicate so that people understand the history of what happened, who was displaced, what happened. And it might be an opportunity for this group. We're talking about there's a marker at Sloss Furnaces that either a historic marker, if this might be a group that could tell that story, and we could go to Lease and Tell and see if he'll give us the money to create one of those markers that would, but I think if nothing else, just to get it said in the space would be really important, just to try to raise awareness, because, not everybody knows if you weren't part of that disruption.
People don't.
So anyway, that's a thought, but I do think, again, tying back to the history is really, really
Absolutely.
that be interpreted here.
Kathy, excuse me. I've already introduced Charles somewhat to this person, but I want to introduce you to Celestia. Celestia, are you here? Where's Celestia? Are you still on, Celestia? Where are you?
She was being a mom with her kids a little bit. She had
Check off. Kathy? Celestia, did you check off? Okay. Anyway, I want to introduce Kathy to Celestia Morgan. She is
here.
Are you here?
She
Hi,
is.
Celestia. Hi.
Cookie, are you here? No. Okay. She is unless you don't know her, maybe you do know her. Are you here, Celestia? No.
Judy, she is. She's trying to speak. Just give her a moment, please.
Go ahead. She is a local, a very special photographer and artist that I want you to know, because she's very interested in this City Walks project, and she's interested in getting involved in it.
Right. Well, and I've not been very involved.
Go ahead, Celestia. It's breaking up a little bit, but go ahead.
Hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, I was just letting them know that I am here and interested in learning more about the project, and I agree with the historic elements of it, that people really don't know why the interstate was there, and it needs to be, brought to the city's attention. And we talked about the neighborhoods that are close to the interstate, which pretty much that goes into a total different subject now, where most of the Blacks are not living in that area anymore. They're being pushed away from that area. So they pretty much will not, those communities won't benefit anymore because they're transitioning from low income Black families. So that's, that's a different story. I don't know. And that's another, a ballpark of who needs to be aware of that as well, or who wants to address that. But most of the time that's pushed under the rug really, really quickly.
Well, Ted
I hope you
Snyder,
heard that.
as Charles said, Ted Snyder has sort of taken on the responsibility with the Civic Center because he will be hiring an executive director. This is just sort of there's Walt Disney and dogs, excuse me, in the background of my place. But I think that there is an opportunity. There will be an executive director of this park space. And again, it would be great if we could all participate in that process. Ted's going to give a talk to the Urban Land Institute, and I can send to you all just a link when he gives that talk, because I haven't heard it either. I know he's been, pretty crazy with COVID and the hotels and building the new stadium and the arenas being renovated, but they have accepted this charge to manage the park through the Civic Center, and they have some resources and he has some budget to hire. So that hire is going to be important, the person that manages this space and how they engage with the community, I think.
Thank you, Kathy. If you can direct that to me at the email that your person used today, that would be great. And I saw that Susan.
Thank you.
Sure. Susan Siegel, you had your hand up.
Right, it's really for Herschel because he has
Hi,
some
Herschel.
professional information about this.
Well, hello there. Listen from
Get in closer, please, Herschel.
I have listened from afar, and I'm delighted to be with you and to see some old friends and to see some new ones. I just wanted to pick up on what Jackie was saying and this idea of making a loop a metaphor, because we're not just placemaking here, we're remembering place. And we're rebuilding that history in a meaningful way for those who are here now and for those who will follow us. The great news is that there are several $100 million that were included in the stimulus bill to re-knit communities destroyed by transportation projects like freeways around the country. And from Cleveland to Memphis to LA, the scars of those projects remain. And we are trying to unite together now to create a coalition of cities trying to rebuild those memories and re-knit those communities together. So Jackie, I do think, and all of you, it is really important to go beyond the great work that Charles has done to think about community rebuilding and revitalization beyond just making a place. And I do think there will be funds available, but more importantly, you will be able to join cities around the country, rethinking their heritage and remembering it and rebuilding it in a way that symbolizes those that have preceded us and those who will follow.
Thank you.
That was
Okay,
a priceless
Charles,
just
go ahead.
piece of information, Melvin. And I'll just point, Kathy, maybe the Urban Land Institute can focus on this. There's a lot of good stuff in this stimulus bill, and if there's a pocket of money for knitting communities together, I think it'd be really easy to package it as part of this project to draw all those sidewalks and bicycle routes through this territory.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. I want to let you know that the program for next month is May 20th. It will be about Dynamite Hill. And want everybody to, we'll be sending an announcement about it, but it'll be a virtual tour of the Dynamite Hill bombings.
And I'll just add many thanks to Charles McKinney, and thank you, Kathy Sloss-Jones, for joining us. This was really important to have you in this conversation. And Herschel, thanks for the information. We'll follow up with you too. Any closing words? Great program. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks.
you all so much.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you
Charles.
so much. It was great. Thank you, Charles and
Yes.
everyone, Kathy.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
All righty.
Thank you.
Thank you.